So this is my first U.S. history video, and I'm going to talk about conservatism and social issues because that's what interested me. So I'm going to start off with a quote from the Varying Viewpoint section on page 1054 of the American Pageant, and it goes a little bit like this. Modern conservatism springs less from a repudiation of government per se, and more from a disapproval of the particular priorities and strategies of the Great Society. So this means that conservatives aren't really so set against government as they are their disapproval of the Great Society Initiative. Now, the Great Society Initiative was Lyndon B. Johnson's domestic program, which was a large amount of New Dealish type economics and welfare measures aimed at transforming the American way of life. Now, New Dealish just means that there were a lot more policies, agencies, and standards going to be enacted to get the job done. Now, the quote above says that conservatives disapprove of particular priorities and strategies of the Great Society. Some of the particular strategies and priorities of the Great Society were the elimination of poverty and racial injustice. But I think conservatives have more of an issue with the fact that there are of the major spending programs in the Great Society, which are addressed to education, medical care, urban problems, and transportation. Some proposals of the Great Society were stalled initiatives of JFK's New Frontier, but Johnson also added many more initiatives when he stepped up to the presidency. Johnson's success depended on his skills of persuasion, but more importantly, I think, was the fact that in 1964, a Democratic landslide brought many new liberals to Congress, making the House of Representatives in 1965 the most liberal House in 30 years. This was unprecedented. Now let's come back to social issues. But to do this, we have to look at the presidential election of 1964. The presidential election of 1964 was between Goldwater, who was a Republican, and Lyndon B. Johnson, who was a Democrat. We're going to focus more on the Goldwater being a Republican side of the election. Before this, the Republican Party had never elected a conservative to the presidential ballot. Now, you may be wondering, wait, I thought Republican, conservative, they're the same thing, but they're actually not. Republican and conservative are different just like Democratic and liberal are. Republican and Democrat are political parties. Conservative and liberal are ideas on fiscal policy. So you can have liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats. It's all on how they orient themselves according to fiscal policy. So in 1964, the Republican Party had never elected a conservative to the presidential ballot until Goldwater. And although Goldwater lost the presidential election, the Republican Party was transformed into more of how we see it today because during the election, the Republican Party amassed more Southern voters than ever before. And even though they lost the election, the Republican Party gained deep roots in a political culture whose authority was increasingly isolated because of the racial issues, and people didn't really want to mess with Southern politics because they didn't want to get into that. And the Republican Party didn't really know how to handle all those racial issues when they first amassed that constituency, but they learned quickly and they figured out they had the black votes. They were pretty happy that they had all that power behind them. It would take them a little while to get used to all that, but once they figured it out, they became an unstoppable force and came back renewed and refreshed, and they embraced family values, religious faith, cowboy boots, and an earthy patriotism. Sound familiar? Reagan, maybe? I don't know. Yeah. They also brought back time-honored Republican beliefs such as individual initiatives, private property, lower taxes, and suspicion of equality over liberty. This renewed Republican Party also brought with it two things. They helped make conservatism an electable force to be reckoned with because, as we see with Goldwater, when they elected a conservative to the presidential ballot, that showed that conservatives were very strong. And they also projected the self into politics and culture of the whole nation in ways that were hardly imaginable 40 years ago. With this new, renewed sense of political power, and both parties having strengthened views on social issues of the time, let's flash forward to the election of 1980 and Ronald Reagan, who suspiciously encompassed all the qualities of the reinvigorated Republican Party of 1965, which were again family values, religious faith, cowboy boots, and an earthy patriotism? Was this sheer happenstance, or was the majority of the American public looking for the rugged cowboy to ride in and save the day? The public was not especially conservative in their views in the 80s, and yet we see that Reagan did all but sweep the entire country. I think this result has everything to do with the social issues of the time and how politicians presented them and how the American public responded. Carter was president before Reagan, and during Carter's term, he made sure that the public knew exactly what was going on, to the point where people were tired of being told all the little details. They didn't want to be bogged down with all that stuff and feel as if it weighed in on them too. Politics were for politicians. They wanted it to be simple and dumbed down, if you will, and they wanted only to weigh in on the issues that they felt affected them. That is where Reagan stepped in. He took firm stances on social issues of the time, like abortion, affirmative action, and race issues, and pornography as well. These were issues in America that everyone knew about, and everyone had a stance on. You only had to know the bare minimum to be able to form an opinion, whether it was intelligent or not. Conservatism as we know it today is not so dead set on the shrinkage of government as it is on the disapproval of the social ideas expressed in the Great Society Initiative by Lyndon B. Johnson. They feel money could be better spent on other things instead of fighting poverty and racial issues, which I'm not saying is wrong or right. Liberals and conservatives simply feel differently about social issues. The operative word of feel in that sentence causes me to think that we need to redefine conservatism and liberalism as fiscal policies, yes, but with the influence of social issues seeping out of every crack. It's extremely hard for people to separate what they believe morally and ethically from how they think government should be. Of course, we want politicians to act in a moral way, but when these morals compromise effective leadership, or when political scandals like the Iran-Contra affair cause people to look through morally tinted glasses saying this is what's right and this is what's wrong and there's no in between, and they fail to look at the true facts, that is when morals and politics don't mix. The law is not based on morals. Everybody has a different set of morals and ethics and standards that they live by. The law states what's legal. We throw our own morals into the mix, a prime example of this being the moral majority led by Jerry Falwell. The Republican Party of 1965 projected the self and culture of the nation into politics. We need to try to take the self out of government. I'm not saying that people should be less involved in government, but quite the opposite. I was asking my mom about the social issues of the 80s because that's when she was in high school and college. She thought for a second and nothing came to mind. I asked her what she cared about back then. She thought again and said, "Goodness, I don't think I cared about anything. Government just wasn't a part of my life." I think we all sort of feel that way. I'm not part of government. It doesn't really affect me. It's us and them. And that's exactly what we need to stop. If you take the eye out of government and look at the big picture, you'll see that it's more than just how you feel about certain issues. Go deeper than just what's on the surface. Learn the history behind why things are the way they are, and in your research, maybe you'll discover the answers to the questions of why you feel a certain way about an issue, and then you'll really be able to do something about it. Thank you.